For most of us, we could never imagine having to flee from our own country because of civil war erupting, all the while hiding from the guerrillas who forcibly kidnapped young men, making them fight for a cause they knew little about. In the 1980s, civil war erupted in El Salvador, located in Central America, bordered by Honduras, Guatemala, and the Pacific Ocean. This country has been plagued by violence and poverty for well over a century. Much of the conflict has been due to overpopulation and the increasing gap between the rich and the poor. These struggles continued for years, involving assassinations and coups by both sides. As guerrillas began their presence, the military reinstated the death squads in order to combat these rebel forces. In 1979, after the junta made promises to improve living standards for the country, but failed, 5 different guerrilla groups united to form the Farabundo Marti National Liberation Front, also known as the FMLN. The government-supported military targeted anyone suspected of supporting social and economic reform. For the next 12 years, thousands of El Salvadorians brutally lost their lives. Both the military and guerrilla forces terrorized the citizens of El Salvador, with reports of rape, senseless beatings, killings, just to name a few. The military death squads wiped out entire villages because they were thought to be assisting the guerrilla efforts. The FMLN began recruiting young males by forcibly taking them from their homes. These males were indoctrinated and trained to fight and were armed with military-grade weaponry provided to the FMLN by Cuba. In the 1990s, reforms continued in which a national civilian police was created to replace the discredited public security forces that were responsible for raping and killing so many El Salvadorians. As of 1999, the PNC had over 18,000 officers. The PNC faced many challenges in building a completely new police force. With common crime rising dramatically since the end of the war, over 500 PNC officers had been killed in the line of duty by late 1998. PNC officers also were forced to arrest some of their own for corruption charges. Many El Salvadorians fled to the United States as political refugees to avoid the violence. Some began new lives with a focus on starting over. Others were drawn into the gang culture in Los Angeles. The El Salvadorians were targeted by many Los Angeles street gangs, and as a response, the El Salvadorians formed their own gang called Mara Salvatrucha, or MS13. This gang is now reputed as one of the most violent in the region. Many believe they are so violent because of the violence they were exposed to after being recruited by the FMLN in El Salvador and then had indoctrinated their younger generations. The FMLN, like the government soldiers, were brutal, merciless, and cruel in their retributions to their enemies, which is exactly what MS13 is now known for. Some members of the MS13, after being imprisoned in the United States, were deported back to El Salvador and have taken strong root in the El Salvadorian nation. MS13 is well connected with the drug cartels in Mexico and has set up human smuggling corridors across their region. Most El Salvadorians who came to the United States have been successful in beginning their new lives. An example of this can be found in Luis Martinez, who fled El Salvador in 1986 when he was only 17 years old.